So we have a quorum, so I am going to call the meeting to order. And so I will say good morning, everyone. I'm Adele Imrie, Chair of the TCHC Board's Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the public session of today's committee meeting. In light of the need for social distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19, we continue to hold committee meetings virtually. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During this public session, there are 4 reports being brought forward to the committee for our information and 10 reports recommending approval from the committee. These are all itemized in the agenda. We will continue to follow the process that we have previously established for both deputations from members of the public and voting during the course of today's virtual meeting. We do have 4 members of the public who would like to depute to an agenda item on today's agenda by teleconference, and we also have written deputations which have been circulated to the members prior to today's meeting. All deputants are speaking to item number 6, which is the Tenants Fund Distribution Policy. So we will hear from them a bit later. I don't have any specific comments to make today. I just would like to thank everyone for their attendance. And we will move on to item number 2. And I will ask if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda or any consent items that any member of the committee would like to pull for further discussion.
Not for me.
Nick?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay. So could I ask if there are any conflicts of interest that any committee member has to declare as it relates to any items on today's agenda?
None here.
Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Seconder, Nick? All in favor? Motion passed. So we will move on to item number 3, which is the business arising from the public meeting minutes and action items update. Does anyone have any comments or questions as it relates to the action item list?
Not for me.
Hearing none, could I have a motion to receive the action item list?
So moved.
Nick, seconder John, thank you. All in favor? Approved. So we will move on to item number 4, which is our annual information return. And I will turn this over to Roseanne.
Thank you, Chair Imrie. We're seeking approval for the annual information return for the year ended 2021. So this is due to our shareholder by May 31st. This is an annual compliance report that's sent over to our service manager annually. And as part of the report, we have to include a balance sheet and income statement, and that's provided through the TCHC financial statements. And the statistical report that's attached to this, this package reports on our unit counts, average income levels, and the number of households by demographic type. So historically, TCHC has been below the service level, and this is due to challenges of our unit inventory, mainly the many bachelor units. There's some hard-to-rent buildings, and then there's also units being held for revitalization. So the main items in this report is we have 58,368 units in total, 49,053 units that house rent-geared income tenants, and this is compared to a service level of 51,818. So this is adjusted for development units. This is below the service level requirement by 2,765 units. However, it should be noted that this is an improvement of 684 units compared to last year. Last year, we had 3,449 below the service level. And this is mainly due to the decision to stop leasing market units and instead only to enter into new RGI leases. So this resulted in an increase of 369 units. As well, we had 315 less households that were over the high income limits. And this was mainly due to the provincial rent freeze and TCHC not processing the loss of eligibility updates during 2021. To also note, there were 5,945 units that house market tenants and then 3,370 units that were vacant. Those are the highlights of the report.
Are there any questions for Nick?
Just in terms of the service agreement, looking at the various units that are not leased, I was surprised to see, almost 377 units that are not in demand. I never had the impression before that we had units available that are available for lease, but just not. There's no demand for. I'm surprised to see that. Is that, and then sort of following that, F and H seem very similar to me in terms of just categorization, which are not in demand. Then H being units hard to rent buildings. Is that the same? What's the difference in those two categories? And I wasn't aware we had vacant units that are available and are, I assume good condition, but there's no prospective tenants for that.
Those are the bachelor units. I may need Nadia's assistance to address that one. And then I also have Jeff Sharp on the line to address the difference between the different categories.
Right. So bachelor units and rooming houses are not in demand in our portfolio. So they're always some of the hardest to lease. So that's item F. And then other buildings in item H, where you have evidence of antisocial behavior, or and they're not in the neighborhoods, certain neighborhoods, they are harder to lease as well.
And these are RGI units.
These are all RGI units.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised bachelor units are hard to lease, just given there's got to be, I would assume, a lot of single people that would require RGI units. I never realized that we had units that there wasn't demand for. I've always been told there's hundreds of thousands of people on the waiting list. So just yeah, and I totally recognize this has probably been reported in past years on this AIF form and so on. But it did catch my eye because it's just contrary to what we're usually hearing about availability of units relative to demand. And recognizing it's a specific type of unit, but for a single person, I expect there to be no shortage of single people looking for units as well.
Jag, did you have something? I saw your hand up.
Through the chair, and thank you, Director McRae. I believe Nadia would agree that we are working with our service provider as well to look at opportunities to improve leasing of bachelor units, but it is absolutely surprising information because, of course, with the size of the wait list, we didn't anticipate that, but we are diving into the detail to understand it better and looking at what we can do to enhance availability of those bachelor units to improve the ability to lease them.
Can I ask a question? If a single person is on the waiting list and their name comes up and there is a bachelor available, they have the right to say, no, thank you. I would like a bigger apartment, or they can refuse and maintain their position on the list.
Through the chair, and Nadia, maybe this would be where you would have a closer idea. I believe the choice-based letting system categorizes it as bachelor or one bedroom. And I think that's maybe where a little bit of the challenge may be, where I think the desire would be more leaning towards more of a one bedroom as opposed to just a pure bachelor. Once again, we're working with SSA to understand essentially what it is that we could potentially do to improve our uptake on bachelor units.
Through the chair, yes, that's accurate. So you qualify for both a one bedroom and a bachelor. And we find that folks tend to prefer one bedroom units. And we're also looking at heat mapping where our bachelor unit vacancies are. And they tend to be in locations in buildings that have other issues of vulnerability. So we're looking at mapping in services and supports to ensure that any additional tenants that are coming into our buildings are supported and the buildings have the necessary services they need.
Can I ask, do we offer these to any agencies or whatever that are dealing with homeless or other people who may be more interested in a bachelor apartment? Or is it just the people on the waiting list?
So through the chair, we are looking at different opportunities to maximize our bachelor units, and we're working with the service manager to potentially align our rapid housing strategy and expediting that to ensure that we have minimal vacancies in our bachelor units. So we're working on that right now.
John?
Yeah, so I think that the failure here is not so much on TCHC's part, but it's a failure on the city's part. The city is putting people in hotels, for crying out loud, and they're renting space. So people are going into hotel rooms down at the Novotel and then up up in Matlow's ward, and I forget where the exact name of the hotel up there, but they've rented all kinds of hotel spaces for people. Why wouldn't one of the first things that the city does is put people into these units? Jag, I don't know if you've had this discussion or if this is a discussion that people have had at the very senior levels of the organization with people at the city. Do they not know these units are available?
Through the chair.
Get the report.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I can't speak specifically to having had that conversation specifically. I can commit to doing so. We do share the information. We do have discussions on the wait list and the opportunities to do things differently. I can't necessarily say that we've had that conversation specifically, but can commit to following up with that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I hate to think that, I mean, it makes no sense to me having somebody that's been there. And I'm sorry Anna's not on the call. She might have a more fulsome response as to why it's not happening, but I'll leave it up to you. That I've got just a couple more questions. Roseanne, in regard to this report, so why is it not, the city obviously hasn't asked for this because we're doing what the city has asked. Why is it not a comparative report year over year?
We can do a comparative report for BIFAC purpose.
No. I don't want to create any work that's not necessary, but I'm surprised the city doesn't ask for this as a comparative report. This is all they've asked for. Does anybody actually read this, and do they ask you to review it with them?
Yes, they do. So the working team does work with Jeff Sharp's team. So Jeff Sharp is our director of property accounting for all the details, and it is reported as part of Jeff is a provincial form.
This is a provincial form. The city is provided with inventory on a quarterly basis, with including a comparative format.
Okay, so obviously the city gets this. It's just a question of whether the right people are having access to this information. Anyway, that's kind of like a question and a comment, and I'll just leave it there. I see Brian's got something, so.
Brian?
I just wanted to say with regard to the bachelors, in terms of supportive housing, because that's the other issue, is moving the right people into the right units, assuming they don't require more supports than we've got available in the units that are available. So that's another dimension that needs to be considered when you're moving in, because if you move people in who require high supports, then you also put more pressure on that particular building to provide those supports necessary to maintain the people in the unit. And so bachelors are a particular challenge that I know from my own experience, where if you're moving people that are homeless into that have a high need for other supports, you got to make sure you've got those supports available. Otherwise, you can make it difficult for the rest of the tenants in that building.
And sorry, just one last question, and really sorry to sort of be going down a bit of a rabbit hole on this one. I'm just again a little surprised, like almost 1,000 units that are available to be rented that we can't find RGI tenants for. Is it fair to say that these units are still working their way through the wait list? Because like as opposed like we haven't gone through the entire wait list, and it just takes time to notify a tenant, time for them to respond, time to go to the next person. Because I obviously like there's thousands upon thousands of people on that wait list. So I just from a process, just so I understand that, like these units are working their way through the process, through the wait list, I assume, as opposed to we've gone through the wait list and we can't find someone to take these units. Is that a fair comment?
Through the chair, and thank you, Director McRae. That is a fair comment that we are, I believe, once again, I wasn't part of the conversation directly, but I think the discussions on the choice-based letting system is to broaden the opportunity for more individuals to be able to look at those properties and consider them from a lease perspective. So they're looking at a few different dimensions on improving the uptake for those bachelor units, but they are certainly still on the list and still being considered.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. Are there any other questions for Roseanne or the team as it relates to the annual information return? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to receive this report for recommendation to the board? John, thank you. Seconder, Brian?
Sure.
All in favor? Aye. Motion has been passed. Thank you very much. We will move on to item number 5, which is the 2021 annual report and letter to the shareholder. And I will turn this over to our CEO.
Thank you, Chair Emery. And if I could invite Paula to join me for this. She's taken the lead on developing this material. And Paula, would you mind?
Absolutely, thank you. So I was going to say I'm pleased to share with you this year's report, annual report, and the letter to the shareholder. I apologize for it not being included, but I do know that Dara has sent the letter to the shareholder to you separately. I will speak specifically to the annual report. You will recall last year that we created an annual report in digital format, which was really well received, and we've done the same this year. What you actually have in your package is the PDF format, but the version that we will have going out will be digital, and it's fully interactive and has some really amazing stories around our tenants and employees and our overall accomplishments of the organization against our key priorities. The letter that you have now received and the annual report together are primary documents, which is how TCHC actually demonstrates full compliance with the shareholder direction and other reporting requirements approved by the City Council. Dara has updated the recommendation that the board approve the annual report that you've received and that we refer the letter to the shareholder to the board meeting on April 25th. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Are there any questions for Jag or Paula on the annual report? I just wanted to say it's quite an impressive document. So I imagine that there's been a lot of time and effort that's been put into it. So congratulations on that. I did want to say congratulations to Louisa. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the award that was received, but congratulations, Louisa. And the only other comment I had is, given the timing of you issuing this, should we recognize that Sheila has retired in this report, or is it too late to do?
It's for last year, right? So.
Well, it's for last year, but it's being issued in April.
We can take a through the chair. We can actually take a look at that. That's a great recommendation. So it's
just if you do it next April, it's like a whole year after she's already gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that it kind of gets lost in that. You know, you always have subsequent events notes in your annual statement. So anyway, just something to consider.
Thank you.
because
Yes, it's a great
I
thought.
do think that she made an incredible contribution, and if we wait another year
Mhm.
to recognize it, I think it's a little bit less meaningful, but that's just my opinion. Are there any other comments or John?
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said, Adele. I think it's very well done. It's impressive, and it sheds a very bright shining light on TCHC and what's being done and all the good work that is being undertaken by staff. So congratulations.
Yeah, it's really amazing when you see it all pulled together, how much gets accomplished. It's really astounding.
We know how much gets accomplished because we sit in on these meetings, Adele.
Well, I know, but when it still looks impressive when you pull it together, and it's good for others.
Right.
To have the opportunity to see.
If I may, once we have the digital version, we'll send you the link and you'll really see it come to life, because we have a lot of videos, a lot of dynamic content. So it's great because it does even more than what you see in front of you. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate the amount of effort that is put into it. So please say thank you to your team. Are there any other questions or comments?
No.
Could I have a motion to receive the annual report?
I just in light of the challenge that we had with the shareholder letter,
Yeah.
I just wanted to share with the committee that what we would propose is a motion to approve the annual report and recommend that the board approve the annual report, that the committee forwards the letter to the shareholder to the board for its consideration, and authorize the president and CEO to forward both documents to the city once approved by the board, and request the city's advice with respect to, so a slight modification to the recommendations in the report to address the issue with the shareholder letter not being properly included in the material for today's meeting.
Okay. Are there any comments on the amended motion? No. Could I have someone move that motion? Brian, thank you. Seconder, Nick, thank you. All in favor? Motion's been approved. And thank you very much, Paula. We really appreciate it. So we will move to item number 6, which is the Tenants Fund Distribution Policy and Procedures. And as I understand it, we have 4 deputants on this matter.
And
would we like to hear the deputants first?
I think that would be good.
So the first deputant is Omar Ananshi, I believe. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Omar Ananshi, and correct.
So, Mr. Ananshi, you have 5 minutes to make your deputation to the board or the committee.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me the opportunity to speak and fight in this matter. My name is Omar Ananshi, and I'm a current youth tenant living in the Eastmore community in Central Etobicoke in the TCHC complex. I've lived in TCHC communities ever since I moved to Canada back in the late 90s, and my family and I have become imperative members of the community, and we love our community so much. I wanted to speak in regards to this item to demonstrate how is really being how this item actually is being played out in the community level. And I understand, for example, I read over the report, and I understand, for example, the Tenant Action Fund has a budget of $250,000 for the entire program throughout for all the TCHC tenants to all the various communities, and the CABR has a budget of $50,000. And so I'm thinking to myself, as an actual potential applicant, I have been an applicant in the past, I've noticed that this system has some potential for improvement or modification to really match the needs of the community and to really make sure that the community needs are met. In particular, I realized that the total budget does not adequately serve the community, as there's only certain funds to go around the community. And then from my understanding, or at least from where I'm at, from my view as a tenant, there isn't really a science or data to help to inform the actual level of investment needed in the TCHC community. For example, I'm not really sure, and a lot of the other youth in my community from the East March Steering Committee, youth-led grassroots group, are not sure how these budgets were came up to, because a lot of the times budgets are developed in maybe based on, you know, budget availability or, you know, other priorities. At the same time, a lot of times based on headcount times overall individual headcount needs. And so I'm suggesting that maybe potentially if we can have, like, you know, both these programs, you know, consolidated together, and for the actual fund to go towards the community to be accessible and to be like maybe like earmarked at a more reasonable amount. And because 300,000 in total in comparison to the TCHC's overall operating budget, 300,000 towards youth needs and youth programming and services, it does not match up. And so I'm suggesting that there'll be some more revisions into making sure that there is an adequate budget to meet the needs, and also for the accountability framework or the accountability checks and balances to really make sure that they are tenant-centric. For myself, East March Community, we applied for the Tenant Action Fund in the past in the past couple of years, and we're still waiting on those funds. And it's like about a year and a half out from being approved from the actual application. So it does speak to the fact that the system is broken and is not meeting the needs of the tenants. And I also really want to emphasize the fact that a lot of these times, there's a lot of these parameters and conditions for each of these particular funds that enable the community from accessing it, or being able to follow up, or being able to comment and ask for status updates. A lot of times when, you know, tenants ask for what's happening, a lot of times, you know, we are left with just with no response until maybe like a year later and say, hey, now we're ready to move forward. If that is the case, which is really half the times it's not. So I'm suggesting that the board takes into consideration to create a fund, especially one towards the youth, that really makes that's based on the science and the data, and it's based off of, you know, individual headcount, and to make sure that the checks and balances systems are in place are still going to serve the tenant without compromising the accounting integrity. That's all my points, and I thank the board once again for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. They're much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Our next deputant, if there aren't any questions for Mr. Ananchi, is Rema Fayaz.
Hi.
Mr. Fayaz, you have 5 minutes for your deputation.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Rama Fayaz. Thank you very much for having me here today. I have been a member of the Interim Funding Committee, and after that, the Tenant Action Fund. And I was also a member of the Participatory Budget Committee, PBC, before that. I think by now I have enough experience in the decisions made about tenant needs and budgets during this time, and have seen different ways of decision making in this respect, and can compare them. During my experience in these past years, I have found out that comparatively, the best committee to decide about tenant budget needs has been the Tenant Action Fund Committee, especially in the level of the budgets that we decide. The reason is that tenants are active themselves in deciding what projects have to be approved and why. As a tenant active in the community and life of my building, I have a first-hand experience of what tenants need in their buildings and how it is provided, and what are the average prices. I know what projects are really necessary and helpful and what projects are not. I have a general idea about the prices. I know what the results and benefits of the projects and events are for the tenants, because I have taken part in them and have benefited from them. I don't think anybody else can have a better judgment about the needs and necessities for the tenant community than tenants themselves, the people who live in the buildings and have a daily experience of life in a housing building, and what is needed to make the community stronger and life better. I believe it is necessary for the tenants to be active and to share in the budget assignment decision making. Sorry, my experience in Tenant Action Funds has taught me firsthand that the presence of the tenants is necessary when a decision is made about events and needs in their building, and who else can know better about the effects and results of a project or event in a building than tenants themselves. The process of decision-making in TAF is detailed and exhaustive, and every aspect of a proposal is considered and discussed, from the necessity of the project to its effects on the community and the prices suggested for the project, and also the after effects and an appraisal of the results. I believe without the presence of the tenant representatives, the decision-making won't be perfect because it will lack our viewpoints and experiences. The results of TAF decisions have been very good, and I hear only positive remarks about it from tenants and participants. I believe if I represent at least the tenants in my building, when I recommend that TAF stays as it is and continue with its great work. Thank you very much again for having me in this meeting.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from committee members? No. Derek, could we have our next deputant?
The next deputant is Debbie Menezes, I believe is the last name. Is Debbie available?
Hello.
Hi. You have
Hello?
5 minutes. Hello.
Hi,
Can you
thank
hear
you
us?
very much. Hi, yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me to this meeting here today. I've been on the panel for the TAF, and I've really had the pleasure of doing so, supporting tenants and residents for this funding that is provided for communities. Through my process, because I've only started doing it as of this year, knowing that it's now on hold, which is sad because spring is coming up. And I feel that we are not getting appropriate information on time, or I can't address anybody because I don't know who to speak to and what is going to take place for this year. I found with the application processing, the scoring with the applications for funding, it was very conflicting. Also, for the even funding when people were putting in for applications, the breakdowns for the applications, everybody would assume that it's $1,000 and just put $1,000 without any more detail. So of course, then you would have to go back to it, address it after with the panel, and then back. So it was going back and forth. Then I found that there was a problem personally with myself that I know of. I don't know about other communities. When applications were made of what people were wanting to do in the community, there seemed to be a problem with no information for vendors and the list and what vendors could provide. So that was ongoing, back and forth, and it became a nuisance. So, and informing the tenants of the TAF applications, or even what TAF is, I find myself that putting a notice just stuck on your elevator or in your lobby on the wall or whatever, it was starting to become like a wallpaper with all kinds of notices all over. So tenants, I don't find that tenants are very updated or have information or understanding of the TAF application and the purpose of TAF. I think it's a wonderful thing for communities because this engages people in the buildings, the residents, of respecting their home and wanting to be a part of making our community either beautiful or have a function. So really right now, or what has been, no one has any answers. And so when residents, which is very important that, we want communities to engage with each other and communicate and know what's going on. We don't have enough tenant meetings, I guess, but I don't know if this is all I think it's even prior to this COVID or whatever. I think COVID is just something that you can just say, oh, it's COVID, and that's why everything has come to a halt. So updates for the funding provided for communities is needed as soon as we can get some information, if we're going to be able to continue, if vendors are going to be more provided and more information is going to be given to us. Other than that, I find that even with the applications that have been made, there's been no follow-up or updates of the monies that have been used for communities and what they have done. So it would be nice that that information can be shared with other communities, or even with the panel or anybody that the funding is going to, that it's been appropriately used and it's been successful. And I guess the key is that when funding is going out, that these projects or events that people want to do in their communities, is that it is successful, and we should have feedback on the success of where the funding is going to. And I guess that's basically all I really want to say about the TAF right now, but I hope that we can get it up and going again for the spring, and then just have, like I said, more changes in the applications and updates, provided more information, a vendors list, what can be provided and what can't be provided, and a little bit more detail into applications as well as how the money is going to be used at the cost. And I thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. And then I think we have one more deputant, Dara.
Correct. The last deputant is Vidya. I believe Vidya is on the line.
Hi there, Vidya here.
You have 5 minutes.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much for having myself and other tenants here. I'll try to avoid, I don't think I have much to repeat in the way of what they've already said. I have a bird. Sorry, that's a bird back there. I just wanted to stop by and comment briefly on some of my participation in the TAF table, specifically on the East End and Scarborough, and express my support for the development of some of these policies and procedures surrounding TAF. Bird, sorry. So I can say personally that it sparked a lot of interesting and relevant conversations about what's going on in the neighborhood. We discuss how these projects can support ongoing work, and I find that especially the neighborhood I'm in, people who participate in the tables might be more likely to engage at their local community hub. I find myself telling people about volunteer opportunities, and so these sort of formal and informal connections are very beneficial, and I've had, I find, positive outcomes in the way of like actual time spent on projects, and even having a process like this for applying for funds and requiring support from other tenants seems to be more likely, or seems to make it so it's more likely that these projects are actually successful, because it's not just, you know, a one-off conversation, but tenants are gathering support, make these applications, get support from their CSCs, from other tenants, and so the projects seem to be more likely to be carried through. And so having that sort of formalized in this process, I found to be really neat, and I'm very optimistic about seeing how this plays out. And I guess these specific projects, I don't have too much to say about that, besides the fact that I see that there are opportunities to improve community cohesion and safety. You've got more people out and about discussing things and noticing when there's gaps that they want to fill. And just the importance generally of participatory budgeting in many, many forms seems to be very valuable for community participation and leadership. But that's it. Just generally speaking, I wanted to come by and say that I think this is a great initiative, as well as the anti-Black racism initiatives that are going on here, and looking forward to seeing how it all goes. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Is that the last?
That's the last of our oral deputants. Yep.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn this over to Nadia.
Thank you, Chair Emery. We're going to share a short presentation to walk us through the policy, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that the board may have. So I will share my screen. Sorry, here we go. So good morning, Chair Emery and BIFAC directors. The purpose of today's item is to seek BIFAC approval for the tenant funds distribution policy and the two programs covered within it. The two programs are the Tenant Action Funds and the CABR Community Funds. By way of background, the Tenant Action Funds and CABR programs are unrelated to the Participatory Budgeting or PB program, which is currently not covered by the proposed Tenant Funds distribution policy. The PB program was paused in 2020 and continues to be on hold, pending a PB review report that is to be presented to the Tenant Services Committee and the Board of Directors in 2023. In the interim, we have paused all PB-related activities. PB historically funded goods in common areas such as fitness equipment, furniture and recreation rooms, and other assets that were for communal use. This is distinct from the two funding streams being discussed today, which are focused on supporting tenant-led programs in our regions. The Tenant Action Fund, or TAF, was established in 2019 to replace the former Tenant Council and Use of Space funds. TAF provides tenants and tenant groups with resources to fund projects and initiatives that respond to local tenant-identified priorities as part of the tenant engagement system. The approval of this matter is of an urgent nature, as tenants will be requesting gardening supplies for this upcoming, gardening supplies this spring for upcoming community gardening programs. The CABR strategy and its budget was approved by the board in 2021. There was no mechanism in place at this time to disperse funds to tenants to implement CABR-specific projects. We have aligned the CABR rollout with best practices around the Tenant Action Funds to ensure consistency, transparency, and accountability for the dispense of all funds for tenant activities. Funds will be provided to tenant-led initiatives that support the implementation of the 8-point plan. TCHC has developed a multidisciplinary team of leaders across different divisions to establish an accountability framework that provides a comprehensive level of oversight, controls, auditing, and a centralized reconciliation function. I will turn it over to Roseanne Lee, Chief Financial Officer, to speak to further measures of accountability.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. So we had audit and finance staff review the end-to-end process to identify any control gaps. To ensure accountability and clear segregation of duties, clear and distinct staff roles were assigned to each task so that we don't have the staff who initiates a task also approving it. So TAF and CABR will have the same process with the standardized forms, which facilitates approval in a quick and efficient manner. The tenant engagement systems managers uses the verification checklist to ensure everything is in order and the relevant documents are included. And that's included, the checklists are included in the attachments. I believe it's 6 and 7. And then the purchasing of the items under this program will only be ordered through the pre-approved vendors, and tenants will not receive funds directly to purchase the goods. And moving on to next. So this highlights, this is a summary of the controls that we have put in place after the applications are received. So the regional managers and CABR center manager reviews each package before the items are ordered. There's a single point of contact that consolidates all the application approval and receipts. There will be a unique number in sequential order that will allow us to track the completeness of the application, so any missing ones can be easily identified. There will also be one GL code that's going to be used for all the items that allows for easy tracking as well as reporting. The regional manager and the CABR center manager reviews and completes the checklist before sign off. And finally, the manager of tests and CABR center director reviews and completes the final sign offs and sends to finance so that they can make the payments to the vendors.
In terms of next steps, once we receive BIFAC and board approval, staff will implement the tenant funds distribution policy in accordance with the approved procedures. This will include a comprehensive communication strategy and training materials to implement the processes, controls, and delivery model as stated in the report. While staff believe that the oversight and control processes established in this policy provide rigorous and responsible oversight, the program delivery plan will adapt to further enhancements resulting from the outcomes of the PV review in 2023. We are hopeful today to move this process forward to create additional opportunities for our tenants. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Are there any questions for Nadia? John? You're on mute, John.
Sorry, yes. So tenant action funds are limited to $1,000. How can you run a breakfast program on $1,000?
So the tenant action funds are intended to support smaller projects in communities, such as events and buying small supplies, such as gardening supplies. It's not intended for longer term programming. So that's not the intent of the fund. I think.
How would you envisage a breakfast program?
We have smaller initiatives where we're able to support minor items. So we don't run full-scale programs through the tenant action fund. So we have seen smaller groups come together to do smaller projects, such as breakfast clubs and programs that fund smaller items. So it is possible. Again, it doesn't fund full-scale programming. It's more smaller programming at a local level.
All right. So if a tenant in a building had space and wanted to do a breakfast program for 5 or 6 kids or however many, they would not do this.
This could be used as sort of an initiator fund. I know that our local teams through the community support and community safety and support pillar support our tenants to apply for funds through external funders, but this fund is not intended to provide longer term programming support.
Okay, and so why is there the difference in funding between the tenant action funds and the CABR community funds? It's quite a discrepancy. So, 1,000 and 5,000. How was that arrived at?
So the tenant action funds we run monthly, and it's broken into East, West, and Central, and it's $250,000 annually. So the idea is that we're supporting multiple projects in the communities at a local level. The CABR funds is a one-time fund currently and may be brought back in 2023. Currently, it's just for 2022, and it's a one-time fund, one-time annual fund. And so the projects are larger in scale, and they're potentially larger than local. So some of them are citywide. And so it's up to $5,000 to run initiatives.
Okay, so just getting back to the tenant action funds, those are intended only for a 1-month duration maximum?
No, not necessarily, but we run the cycle monthly. So the application cycle comes in monthly. So there's additional opportunities to apply for funds throughout the year, whereas the CABR funds is a once a year fund.
Okay, and so how did that $1,000 limit, how was that arrived at? Based on what sort of background knowledge?
So I'm going to ask.
Questioning whether, Nadia, I'm just trying to question whether it's enough for somebody. Obviously it depends on the scale that somebody wants to do, right?
Absolutely. So Julio, I don't know if you're able to speak to that. He is manager of the tenant engagement system and could speak to how we arrived at the $1,000.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the $1,000, I wanted to clarify that not all applications are up to $1,000. Through the panel, to the panel's review, that's where the conversation happens, and the panel determines, based on the items that they're suggesting, the total amount based on their knowledge. We receive applications that are to support components of various programs, and you were, John, referring to the breakfast program. We might not receive the application to run the program itself on the monthly basis, but different components. So let's say a good example, we need new pot for the program. That's the resources that tenants will have to access in order to address that particular need.
Okay, and then I guess, Nadia, this is probably not, it wasn't your decision, but when it talks about ineligible expenses, so so volunteer recognition is important, and we offer a plaque or a certificate. Why would we not show a little bit of flexibility on the gift, like a gift of a nominal gift of $15 to $20 or something like that. I mean, it's just, it could be a plant, it could be a pot, it could be, something nominal. It doesn't have to be, I mean, so that it's not prone to excesses or abuse. But it's just that I think that it's a little more meaningful than just a little certificate saying thanks for devoting your time. Anyway, I'll just put it out there. I mean, do you have any comment or how is this arrived at?
So I think we were trying to ensure that we maintained controls and we were putting things in place so there was consistency across the regions and there was an interpretation around what a nominal gift would be. And so we wanted to ensure that we were working closely with the tenant groups to align our processes. Having said that, I do think your point is valid in terms of us looking into other ways to support our tenant groups that might be a little bit less rigid to acknowledge their support and participation. So we could definitely take that away.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Brian? Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Some of the things that tenants might purchase is some equipment, like if they're wanting to run a program for kids, it could be for the supplies or whatever, those sort of things that they would use this money for. Nadia?
Yeah, so through the chair, the idea isn't to fund equipment necessarily. It was to fund smaller supplies, which is why the maximum is just $1,000. So it might be construction paper, smaller items, to Julio's point, maybe pots and pans, but that's part of the purpose.
And a second question is, obviously, would like to get some feedback somehow in terms of the success of this program. So maybe you could just comment a little bit on, like, we know this is working well or not, or we need to make some adjustments. Maybe you could just comment on how you might assess the program, at the end of the year to know whether the funds that went out actually increased community involvement in various buildings, what we can learn from it so that the next year we can improve the program even more.
Definitely. Thank you for that question or that comment. Absolutely. We do receive report backs on all of the applications and grants that are funded. I think we could do a better job of showcasing some of the awesome projects that we've seen to date and will continue to see. And I think if requested, we can bring back a formal report to the board as well to speak to those. We definitely have the information. I think we need to do a better job of sharing it and working with Paula's team to get that out publicly.
I also, sorry.
As good as it is to hear those things, I guess I just want to know that you're getting the information so that you can make those decisions. I don't want to stick my thumb in all the time, but I want to know that you've got the information to evaluate and keep improving tenant involvement, whether it's increasing the amount or changing the process in some way to give tenants more involvement.
Definitely. And I think there were a couple of comments from the deputants that we are also taking into account just in terms of looking at how we could potentially better support young people, as well as looking at the application process and the communication strategy. So that is something that we're actively doing and will continue to do. So thank you. And we will do that.
Thank you.
I also think that individual communities would benefit from hearing what has worked in other communities so that they're not reinventing the wheel each time. And, someone might come up with an amazing idea that's worth sharing and implementing in other communities. So I do think it is worth, blowing your horn or the tenants' horns when it comes to how they've utilized these funds and how successful they are.
Absolutely, Chair Emery. That was one of the things I noted from the deputation. Can we do a better job of sharing best practices and some of the ideas and spreading the knowledge? So definitely something we will implement.
So, are there any other questions, Nick? No. So I had a couple of questions. I know that you're trying to make a distinction between the the PB and these funds. Except for the dollar value, I think that there is some duplication as far as, you know, what tenants can buy and how they can utilize the funds. I was wondering if the Tenant Service Committee had looked at this proposal.
They haven't. We haven't formally submitted it to the Tenant Services Committee, but the next step on this would be for it to go to the board. The intention of this fund, and the funds were always parallel. So this isn't to replace PB. It was always in existence alongside, I shouldn't say always, since 2019, alongside PB. And this is to purchase smaller items specifically for programs, not so much equipment. So we're trying to avoid duplication in that, but I don't know if there's a formal recommendations from your end, Chair Emery, but the hope is that we could have that discussion at the board if necessary. We have sent the information over to, I believe, some members of TSC. I'm not sure. I need to check on that before Sheila left, but it hasn't formally gone to TSC yet.
And I don't know what the process is at TSC to review the PB. I just wanted to make sure that they're aware of this fund and that they understand how it integrates with PB or the whatever PB becomes in the future. I had a couple of questions about the policies don't really address value for money or how the vendors are selected, and you know, if someone's comparing prices of items. I know these are smaller ticket items, but I know that that's been an issue in the past. So I was interested to know how you're addressing value for money and ensuring that you know, these events follow other policies that TCHC has in regards to, you know, price of food and those kind of things.
I don't know, Roseanne, are you able to comment a little bit about that piece?
I can comment about choosing the vendor. So it will be from the approved vendor list. It will be up to the business unit. So Julio and Nadia, your teams to identify how we get the value for money in terms of comparison of the vendors.
And that we will definitely work on and implement.
I didn't see anything about that in the policy, and also tenant vendors.
Can you speak a little bit more about that, Chair Emery, in terms of tenant vendors?
I'm just, is there a policy as to selection of tenant vendors? Do they get preference in these programs? How is your approach to utilizing tenant vendors when you're selecting?
I may be able to speak to some aspects of that. If you turn to page 193 of the package, for example, in the TAF procedures, there's language that outlines the steps that are taken to select vendors that would supply the items that would be purchased through the program. So the first step is to determine whether or not the vendor from who would be supplying the item is an approved vendor by TCHC already through the HOMES program. If the businesses aren't a TCHC vendor, then the committee who is making the decision on the application is to conduct research on vendors that would provide a product and ensure adherence to our procurement policies. So our procurement policies identify that the default approach to procurement is a competitive procurement process. And through that mechanism, there should be some guarantee or some mitigation of risk that we won't have value for money in the items that are procured to support the program.
So through the chair, we have also implemented where it's a different person who identifies the vendor and the final approval. So you don't have the person being, if they choose the same vendor every time, there is another person that could potentially question why that vendor is being chosen and has the potential to override. So in the past, where we have one person and there's not enough of a segregation of duties, we have one person who could initiate the purchase, choose the vendor, and then submit an order. So having the segregation of duties and having different individuals initiating it and then doing the final approval, we're trying to prevent that from happening.
Okay, if we can, be as clear as possible, and I just want to ensure that there's proper training, because I think that that's come up in the past where it's been obvious that people who are involved in these processes aren't aware of other policies that impact them as far as, pricing and value for money, and what qualifies as a tenant-led enterprise. So I do want to make sure. I just want this to be as successful as possible, and that we learn from issues that have been raised in the past. I will ask, when it comes to the tables that you refer to, and you mentioned that there's management and tenants, is there are there guidelines as far as who makes up those tables, and the balance of management to tenants, and ensuring that both groups are represented?
Through the chair, absolutely, there are guidelines. I believe there's one management who would be the manager of community safety and support for the region, and 6 tenants. And so we ensure that the decision-making lies, the majority of the decision-making lies with the tenants, but the management is there to ensure it's in line with our controls and processes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I missed the composition of the, I knew they had both groups involved, but I missed the numbers that were involved. So I appreciate that. I will say that if you want to go through this package, there's inconsistency as to what's allowed and not allowed, specifically as it relates to the CABR program. On page 199, you have a list of what is allowed and not allowed. And then on page 238, there's a different list, and it includes liability insurance is one of the items. And I was curious what kind of events you would be having that you would need one-off liability insurance that wouldn't be covered by the corporate programs.
So Evelyn Mponza from the center is here. Evelyn, I don't know if you could speak to any of the events or programs specific to CABR that would address Chair Emery's question.
Good morning. I can speak quickly to just some of the requests that we've seen in the past when vendoring tenants, for example, tenant groups, and there's been often requests for liability insurance for as part of our vendoring process, from what I understand. And so we've used consultants, for example, to engage community. And in the past, they've been asked for liability insurance, and so we included that there, just anticipating that it might be a barrier in the future, depending on the kinds of initiatives that tenants wanted to run. And so we included that there, anticipating that it might be a barrier, not that anything that was coming up recently required that liability insurance.
I was just curious why it wouldn't be covered by TCHC liability insurance, and why you would need separate liability.
So in the event that a vendor is providing services to a tenant group, and that funds from the program are supporting the use of that vendor, I think the intention is that TCHC wouldn't pay for that vendor's insurance, that they would need to have their own insurance coverage in order to protect TCHC from liability, and they'd be responsible for the cost of that insurance. I think that may be the intention, Evelyn. Is that your understanding?
But is that not the vendor's responsibility? Anyway, I don't want to get into this, but it just, sorry, Brian?
Just from my past experience, I know when we've had events in other locations, the organization requires us to provide liability insurance for them. So maybe this is the same thing.
Yes.
I would have thought that would have been covered by TCHC, but anyway, there's inconsistency in the listing, and so I just recommend that all the documents, when it comes to the definitions, also about what the CABR program. Anyway, I just would recommend that someone go go through that. And just to go back to my tenant services, is there a need for this to be, and is, where's John? John, aren't you chair of the tenant service committee?
I am, yes. And we, I mean, I
So
think
I don't know what the status of PB is and what your feeling is, whether this needs to be considered there as well, or if it's just the BIFAC.
I think it's fine here. We're going through it, and then we can also have a chance to kick at it at the board if others have want to weigh in on it.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of work's been done. You don't necessarily want to hold it up. I mean, we want to iron up.
I don't want to hold it up. I just know that you're dealing with PB, and I just put it out as a question before we, BIFAC approves this for recommendation to the board. And I do appreciate that other board members will have a say. Okay, are there any other questions? Comments? So can I have a motion to approve the tenant fund distribution policy as recommended and for recommendation to the board? John? Nick, seconder, all in favor? And I do, Nadia, I do wish you a lot of luck with this. And I think, to Brian's point, I think that the more you can get the information out, certainly we're very interested, but I also think within the communities, I think it will only make the program stronger and ensure that as many communities benefit from great ideas as possible. And I think that that's really, really important.
Absolutely.
So I wish you lots of luck. So if we could move on to item number 7, which is the Yardi change order. And I'm going to turn this over to Louisa.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm seeking the approval of the BIFAC committee for a change order to Yardi Canada in the amount of $1,056,536.80 to accommodate the extended Track 2B rollout that was delayed as a result of COVID and the Omicron variant. We did make a decision to postpone training, which has now commenced on March 14th of this year. And it also includes an additional, as part of the change order, some additional reports and customizations that we have been accumulating over the course of the project. As it was a statement of work with fixed price, we picked up some of the additional changes in this change order. BIFAC approval is required because the recommended change order is a cumulative amount exceeds the 2.5 million of the original award and exceeds the financial approval limits of Toronto Community Housing's Procurement Award Committee. I'd also like to point out, please, that in the reasons for the recommendation section of this document, some paragraphs were admitted in error before the report was submitted. The missing paragraphs only continue to outline the reason for the delay of the final launch, which did induce this change order, but do not impact the overall details of the specific change order. And I am seeking approval of the committee.
John?
So you're looking, there's $680,000 for resource extension to accommodate the delayed Track 2B Track 2B-2 rollout. So what does that mean exactly? Obviously, during COVID, I gather that some work was not done because of COVID that was contracted for.
No, what it is that we retain consistency of the resources to support our launch. So in the event of an extension, we continue to keep the same consultants on. This change order requires those consultants to remain for 10 weeks so that they are available for training and also for support. So some work was pushed into this time frame as well. We did continue to do some issue resolution, but the reason for that is to retain consistency amongst our consultants and to retain them for the support and training.
Okay,
Which
okay, I get it. So we need them for a longer period of time. So given that we've all adapted fairly early on to this means of doing business, and given that this is pretty much the way things continue to happen, both at TCHC and at the city, why? Explain to me why this work wasn't done during the height of COVID in an online environment.
Yeah, so the reason for the delay was so that we could conduct in-person training. We did make a commitment to the building staff, which is part of this launch, which includes our superintendents, our CMP, many other people that are working in our buildings, that we would deliver in-person training to make it more conducive for them to adapt to the solution. So
was there any online training?
Yes, there is actually online training going on currently right now, but it's for areas of the organization that are already in homes. These are, we're conducting in-person training for those who have had no prior experience with homes, and it is with the building staff. It was a discussion also with our union leadership. They strongly recommended to the Homes Project that this training be conducted in person, and they are also participating with that training.
So, okay, so some of our staff have been trained in homes.
Oh yes, we have more than 1,000 people trained within homes.
And so, is there not the level of expertise to do this training internally? Have our own people?
The training is being conducted with a combination of our project staff and our Yardi team as well. So it is a combination. It is, and that's how we've conducted all of our training. It is what we call a 3-in-the-box model, where we have some business support, we have the Homes Project support, and we have Yardi.
And why can our project team not do the remaining training?
So we also need to also continue to keep our resources on for support. So this is not strictly about training. So we did extend the project for training purposes, but we also continue our vendors to do issue resolution following the launch. So this project continues after May 9th, and we do have our Yardi resources on past that for 3 months of support. So it's not just about the training.
All right, and so this 680,000 is for additional support after a date in May, you said?
No, it's for a 10-week extension. So what we do is we push out. So we have added 10 additional weeks prior to the support starting. The support agreement was already in our original scope of work, and that just starts later.
So the support agreement the additional support was part of the original agreement.
Correct.
And so it was already baked into the original 17 million.
Correct. Yes.
All right. And so why is it now being extended?
We've extended the project to accommodate the delivery of in-person training. We were going to go live on February 28th. We extended that go live by 10 weeks to May 9th. We were required to keep all of our resources, which includes both internal and project resources, with more than just Yardi, to accommodate that 10-week extension. And so now we're in the middle of training, and then we will go live and continue with our support.
Okay, all right. It's still a little baffling to me. There's also a line item for 58.
John, can I just, Jag put up his hand, so he may have a point to clarify to assist you.
Through the chair and to you, Director Campbell, I'm not sure if it'll be helpful, but I think the delay is a COVID-related delay. So the way that we've had to adjust as a result of COVID has resulted in the 10-week extension. It did the support, as Louisa had indicated, for the 3 months afterwards wasn't impacted. It's the how we had to adjust in order to implement as a result of COVID. And I believe these, and Louisa and Roseanne, these are COVID related expenses that have been categorized that way and reflected to the city as well.
There's two things. There's training and there's support after implementation.
Correct.
And so I'm told that the training cannot be done of the people who remain untrained, cannot be done by the people in TCHC who have been trained, I gather.
No, that's
Yeah, through the chair, I think it's that we require a combination of, still we have the Yardi team and the external, but as Louisa had indicated, we are developing subject matter experts within the organization that not only will contribute to the training being delivered, but allow us for continuity in the future as well. And so that is part of, actually part of the discussion that we'll be having on the 12th as well, as far as what our plans are to ensure that we're continuing to invest in our staff so that we can have a higher level of expertise with the system moving forward.
Okay, so this is now the original contract award was 17 million. We will have now given this company 21 million, and they're still asking us to pay another 318,000 for some supplementary reports. So
yes.
why? I'm just wondering how this negotiation works. Why is there no why aren't there any freebies? I mean, what are we getting for an extra 300,000 on the reports?
So we have very strong negotiations with Yardi, and there are several cases where we have negotiated with them, and to your point, had some additional work done at no cost to Toronto Community Housing. In the original scope of work, we had outlined a number of changes that would be part of the solution. So we factored in a number of hours that we might require for some customizations. We considered the number of reports that would need to be developed. But as the project has progressed, things have changed with respect to the operational reorganization. Most of these changes are a result of the organizational redesign, where we go from a centralized model to a decentralized model, and we put more work in the hands of the superintendent. A lot of the reports and customizations reflect that change and were not considered in the original scope. So we've asked Yardi, and who has been a good partner with us, to put in some customizations, put in some additional programming, and create some additional reports to align to that new model of centralized to decentralized and the new organizational structure. I might also want to add that this is net new modules that are being added. So those that are currently on the homes system do not have any knowledge and are being trained on this application. So this is net new training. Those that are trained on the homes project are in our tenancy management space, in our finance, in our procurement, in our capital space. This is building services, demand maintenance, which is a net new launch.
How many new reports are we asking for?
I don't have that information available to me. I can go back and get that to the committee.
I would think we would know that if we're spending $300,000. We would
So
know.
this is, yeah, through the chair, this is not just about reports. It's also about some additional customizations that we've asked Yardi to do, again, to support the model of a decentralized demand maintenance. For example, there's some additional programming to allow the vendors to immediately populate to the superintendent so they're able to select the correct vendor when dispatching it. That's one example.
And what's the 58,000 for travel and expenses?
So that is part of our original agreement. When we do have some resources that are local to Toronto that have traveled from other areas of the Yardi organization and are here locally to provide support. So we accommodate that in our original agreement.
So we have to, so in addition to paying for the additional reports and the additional resource extension, we have to pay for them to fly their people in from wherever.
Those individuals are already here, and yes, we do. That's part of our agreement.
Okay, that's it, Adele. Thank you.
Thank you.
You do mention at the end of the report, Louisa, that you were kindly, you pointed out for me there's a split between what's covered by your home's budget and what's covered by the COVID delays. And you do reference that some of it is coming out of your contingency. So could you just date us on what's left in the contingency?
Yes, there is about $600,000 remaining in the project contingency. We will be providing a Q1 update at the next BIFAC meeting.
Okay, and so you deem that the 600,000 is sufficient to get you through?
Yes.
To the end of the project?
Yes, we are seeing that there is some reduction when we do the Q1 financial reports. We do see there is some reduction in areas, and we will be adjusting our forecast around internal resources. So we have had some resources leave the project a bit earlier. So we're just reviewing our statements. And so I feel confident that we'll be able to make the end of the project with the remaining contingency.
Okay. And can you just remind me what was the original contingency?
The original contingency was 3.94 million.
Okay, so we've got 600,000 remaining.
Correct.
Okay.
So also making a note that we reduced the overall budget by $900,000 when we descoped the track 3. So our overall budget has been reduced by that amount. It was originally 55.3 million and now it sits at 54.4 million.
Okay, and I understand that related to the contract managed buildings, but that wouldn't impact your contingency.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions for Louisa as it relates to the Yardi change order? And John, we are having a special meeting on homes, and KPMG, who is our consultants, they will be in attendance. So could I have a motion to approve the change order for Yardi? Nick, thank you. Could I have a seconder? Brian? All in favor? Okay, your change order has been approved, Louisa. If we could move on to item number 8, which is the change order as it relates to Rogers Communications. And Louisa, this is also your item.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I'm seeking BIFAC's approval for a change order for mobile devices, voice and data services that are currently provided by Rogers Communication. We are in the middle of a 4-year agreement, which expires on January 31st, 2024. The amount of the change order is for 1.407, there's lots of numbers here, $1,407,022.65 to accommodate the additional subscriptions and the additional services required by Rogers Communication. In that change order, we have calculated an additional $1,279,000 for funds for mobile voice and data services, and put in an additional 10% contingency for unplanned additional demand. As part of this, it's important to note that we negotiated with Rogers through the Ontario Ministry of Consumer and Government Services, and we did join to the provincial, Ontario Provincial's vendor of record, and Rogers was a successful proponent of that. So we have our agreement with that, where Rogers was the winning proponent of that. We've had in the original agreement, which was starting negotiations in 2019, had contemplated about 1,700 mobile devices that would be on our plan over the course of our agreement. That number now sits to be, by the end of the contract period, 3,600. So there's a number of reasons outlined in the report why we have additional mobile devices. Part of it was induced by COVID, and we did consider some of those funds with respect to COVID, but it also is introducing flexible work. It is introducing some security procedures that we're putting in place that require employees to have a mobile device. And it also is a result of homes. So we are introducing a considerable amount of mobility in this final phase of the home solution. And we had anticipated we might be using smartphones for that, but recognize that we needed to use tablets for that. So altogether, that required an increase in the number of subscriptions and therefore the need for this change order. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
There, John?
So how many buildings have been switched over from contract managed to direct managed?
I don't have that number at my fingertips, but this involves the number of employees. So we've brought in approximately 300 employees, which we have provided mobile devices to. So
Well, that's why I know I read, sorry, I read the report. I see that it's 300. I'm just wondering why it's 300. I mean, cleaners don't need these mobile devices. I'm just wondering who are these 300 going to?
Actually, we do deploy mobile devices to our cleaners.
We do.
Yes, we do.
Why do we do that?
We do that. We did have mobile devices to them all together. We had provide flip phones. It was shared in a decision in 2019 to provide greater safety and for the cleaners to be reachable by superintendents. We upgraded their flip phones to smartphones, and we now provide them to all cleaners.
Why does a cleaner need a smartphone? They just need to be reached, right?
So our cleaners are also part of the application for the future. So they are going to be involved in receiving work orders to address any building needs in the buildings. So they will be receiving work orders. They also do log into our systems and they do interact and therefore will require a mobile device for our future security protocols.
And what about the staff from the 83 buildings that are going to the new seniors organization?
Yes, that's incorporated into this change order as TCHC will be providing IT services to seniors housing.
So we have to cover their telecommunications costs as well.
It's part of our shared delivery for which we will be reimbursed for that.
Okay. That's it, Adele. I didn't know cleaners had to have smartphones. I think that's they're cleaning buildings. I don't know why they need to have like the latest iPhone, Anyway.
I don't know necessarily, Louisa, that you say that they have the latest iPhone, but
yeah, so this this is for the data services. So we typically get our devices at a substantially reduced cost. They don't have the latest iPhones, but this is for the data services and mobile services.
I just find it kind of shocking that an organization that is providing community housing and is trying to stretch every dollar, in my view, in this case, isn't doing that. And I don't know. I mean, we should be looking to save money and cut corners, still be efficient, still get the job done. I mean, the job has been done without, smartphone, without everybody walking around with a smartphone in their back pocket. And it seems that we're not really following that sort of mantra that we want to watch save every nickel we can, and I'm just a little baffled by it. That's it, Adele.
thank you, John. Are there any other questions? I can't see Brian. Has Brian left?
Brian, I think, indicated that he was having some IT issues.
Okay.
And that he would be trying to sort them out and get back into the meeting.
Okay. Nick, do you have any questions?
No questions on this item. Thank you.
Okay. I had a couple of questions. I just wondered what budget line is accounting for this change order?
It's in our mobile budget line within IT, and we did project this in the 2022 budget, so it is in the budget. We were just preparing the numbers and ensuring that we had all the details so that we would only proceed with one change order for the remainder of the contract. So it is in our budget.
I just wanted to make sure that you had accommodated it when we were doing the 2022 budget.
I have.
Okay. And I guess you have not quantified as yet what the reimbursement will be for TCHC. That doesn't come off. You haven't quantified that yet.
Those discussions are in progress right now.
Okay. And my last question is, I'm used to seeing contingencies in budgets when you're contracting. I'm used to you contracting for whatever services that you need and how they've been priced. I'm not comfortable with a contingency of 10% in a change order. as it relates to contracting with Rogers.
Okay.
And so I was curious as to why you wanted to implement or include a 10% change order in a contract.
Yeah, this was a recommendation in discussions with our procurement team. We can certainly bring that back for further discussion.
Jag?
Yeah, through you, Chair Emery, thank you for the question. I believe it's also as part of the development of our hybrid work model and considerations that there is still work to be done in order to understand, I guess, what the future state needs will look like going forward. We are working with the city to understand their steps moving forward. So I believe the contingency is in place as a result of not necessarily knowing exactly what the future state will look like.
Yeah, I'm just as a practice, and it's not just specific to this this change order. I'm not comfortable with that. I think if you're contracting for services, you should know what services you're contracting and what the price is, and that's what the change order relates to. I'm fine with contingencies and budgets, but not when you're contracting. And if there are significant changes as it relates to the the flexible work model, and I know everyone's trying to find out what the sweet spot is for that, then I would prefer that you came back to the organization. I just don't want that to be that every time we have a change order that we're incorporating contingencies in there. I think that the work needs to be done as it relates to the specific contract. So can we take the 127,000 out?
Yeah,
that would be my choice, because I'm concerned it's not a great practice to
yes.
get into.
So I think go ahead, Dar.
I was just going to say I can amend the motion to
Yes.
reflect the deletion of the contingency amount. So that would reduce the value of the change order to $1.279 million if you take out the contingency, and then the second part of the motion would authorize staff to affect the actions necessary to implement the recommendation. So the motion would look like this. Recommended by BIFAC, approve the change order, to approve a change order in this amount to accommodate substantial increase in requirements below. Sorry, I think we can actually do this. For mobile and data services, and authorize the appropriate staff to take necessary action.
I'm presuming that 1.2 million, Louisa, will accommodate the services that you need, that you know that you need, and I appreciate that as you develop, your flexible work model, and as other things change, as they always do, you can come back to us. I just.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Emery. We'll do that.
Perfect. So are there any other questions for Louisa? Okay, could I have a motion to approve the change order for Rogers Communication? With just Nick, and Brian isn't attending, so John, it's
well, you don't technically need a seconder, but I'm gonna be opposed to it, Adele.
Oh, okay. So you okay, if we don't need a seconder, then all in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Motion has passed. And thank you, Louisa. We will move on to
thank you.
Item number 9, which is the reconciliation of preventative maintenance and demand repair programs and elevator contracts. And I will turn this over to Alan.
Thank you, Chair Emery. Good morning, members of BIFAC. Thank you for the opportunity to walk you through the extent of reconciliation that was completed on 101 programs
Alan, it's
and
very hard to
contracts
hear
that gov-
you. You're breaking up.
Oh, is this any better?
Right now it is, yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to walk through the extensive reconciliation that was completed on 101 programs and contracts that govern our preventive maintenance, demand maintenance services, and elevator contracts. As committed to in the November BIFAC meeting, as part of the quarterly reconciliation process, a year-end reconciliation of these programs was completed. This manual reconciliation took over 200 hours and consisted of reviewing over 80,000 work orders. The results of the reconciliation were as follows. 101 programs and contracts were reviewed. All programs were within the total approved award. 50 had no previous change orders and required no further action. 46 had previous change orders and required no further action. 5 require further action on our agenda for today for review and approval. 2 of which had no previous changes. The remaining 3 did have previous changes. Of the 101 programs, I do want to point out that 37 of them started in 2021 and 2 of them started in 2020. The previous changes on these contracts were largely related to the increases related to the addition of buildings. From 2017 to 2021, approximately 1,060 additional units were added to the portfolio through new developments, and 3,831 units were added when the former contract managed buildings became direct managed. We also had changes due to vendors being removed due to performance issues, increases in the scope of work that was required, cost increases, corrections for in-year spends, and extension of a contract due to a renewal not being actioned in time. Facilities management has worked with finance to complete this reconciliation and will continue to complete these reconciliations on a quarterly basis. Throughout the reconciliation process, there were many lessons learned. Some of them were, for example, ensuring that the company-wide full spend information is obtained when putting together an RFP. There were a number of contracts that are used by several different business units within the company, and it's an imperative going forward that the RFPs capture the total company spend. This was particularly evident in the reconciliation of demand plumbing contract, which will be reviewed in more detail in item 9B on our agenda. Explicitly stating all services in the RFP to ensure that the spend amounts are established at the time of the contract award was also another lesson learned. We also want to ensure that we have accurate forecasting going forward so that we are being proactive and not reactive. The reconciliation helped highlight that while total approved spend amounts were not exceeded, in-year spends were exceeded, which are now retroactively being corrected and setting up properly for the year as required. Completion of the quarterly reconciliation, which includes forecasting, will ensure that we are being proactive and will be able to obtain approval for any changes in advance of requiring them. Tying the budget to spend was also another lesson learned. While the budget for these programs was always available, the budget process was not tied back to the award approval process, and this was a significant gap that we've now closed. Currently, there is no automated way to tie these 2 key pieces of information together. However, with the introduction of Track 2B in homes, there will be an automated connection which will provide a further level of governance over the process by tying the approved award to the issuance of purchase orders, tying it to the budget. Until Homes Track 2B is implemented, the reconciliation will continue to be completed on a manual basis. Last important lesson learned was also ensuring that we tie for future awards going forward, that we account to ensure that there is the approval for inflation or cost increases. We've specifically seen a lot of cost increases happen over the last couple of years. And again, in the vein of being proactive, we want to make sure that future awards that we get approval for will account for this so that we won't be in a position to require change orders. The work completed through these programs is vital to ensure that we are providing safe and comfortable homes for our tenants and that we're properly maintaining our buildings and related building services. Equally as important is ensuring that the work is necessary and is performed satisfactorily to ensure we have value for money. For these programs, we have always had a good solid process in place to ensure this. Prior to any demand work being completed by a vendor, the work must be approved by TCHC. This can be done through on-site inspection or through requesting photographs to demonstrate the necessity of repairs and confirmation that the work has then been completed. Random inspections are also completed to ensure satisfactory completion of the work. This process has been in place for many years, and it helps to ensure that we have vendor compliance. To ensure value for money, all programs are tendered through a competitive bid process, and the rates obtained are generally locked in for a number of years. These factors, coupled with the reconciliation process, ensure that we have a solid programs and processes in place. The completion of this reconciliation and the approval of the associated change orders on today's agenda assure that all of these contracts will now be within compliance, and then the quarterly reconciliations completed going forward will ensure they remain in compliance going forward. This report is presented for your information, and I'd be pleased to answer what questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Alan?
Just a quick comment. I don't think I've seen this report before, and I quite appreciate it in terms of lessons learned. And there's obviously a lot of awards that happen and a lot of change orders that happen that we sort of see on an individual basis. So I appreciate sort of seeing the bigger picture and sort of the reconciliation of how many do see change orders and how we could be doing a better job. So I just want to say appreciate the work that was done here.
Thank you.
This is actually a new report. I think Alan will be doing it quarterly going
Correct.
forward. And I think he still has to do it manually for the next quarter, but then I think it's to be automated, which will make it much easier, Nick, to get a window on.
I'm glad it wasn't just my bad memory that I haven't seen it before.
No, it's not. And it's because a number of these change orders have come up, and there clearly have been issues with the change orders, and it's for a number of reasons. So I think that the lessons that Alan has learned and the changes that he's worked with Roseanne and her team, I think will make a big difference and will allow Alan to be much more proactive about issues with these preventative maintenance contracts, and we'll be able to deal with it in advance, as opposed to what we've been doing retroactively, and in some cases asking the committee to approve money that's already been spent. So it was a huge undertaking, and I think a lot has been learned from it, and there will be a number of significant changes. John?
No questions.
Okay, could I have a motion to receive this report? John, thank you. And Nick, all in favor? Thank you. And we do look forward to Alan receiving this report on a regular basis. And I do appreciate the effort that your team has put into it, and the lessons that you've learned from the analysis, I think will make a big difference to the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree.
And we can see that when we look at these change orders that are coming forward, because they all result from your reconciliation.
Correct.
Okay, so let's move on to 9B, which is the plumbing change order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9B is the first of 5 change orders that were touched upon as part of the year-end reconciliation that was completed. The request is for a large change order to balance the previous year's spend on the demand plumbing program, as well as request additional funding for 2022 based on historic spend coming from the reconciliation. When this program was established, the annual anticipated spend was based on what facilities management had previously spent. Unfortunately, this did not take into account for plumbing work completed through other departments within TCHC, such as building staff, client care, maintenance, dispatch, risk, and insurance. They should have been included. As a result, although budget was always available, the spend approvals were significantly understated. To balance the previous year's spend and ensure the necessary approvals for 2022 are in place, an approval of $23.5 million is required. The breakdown of the requested amount is as follows. We have $5.2 million for 2020 work that was completed. We have $7 million for 2021 completed work and $11.3 million for forecasted 2022 work, which includes the addition of the contract managed buildings from the East and Central that have occurred this year. There was a previous change order to this program in the amount of $350,000 for the addition of contract managed buildings from the West when they came in. Work delivered through this program is confirmed and inspected through either building staff or facilities management to ensure that the work is necessary and that it's completed satisfactorily. Due to the large change requests before you, this program will be retendered this year to reset the program and associated approvals for 2023. Your approval is requested to ensure this necessary work continues uninterrupted.
Are there any questions for Alan? John?
So in the report, you mentioned that TCHC's picked up an additional 1,060 units through new developments, but new developments, I would think, don't require much in the way of plumbing maintenance work.
They typically wouldn't require the same as what an older building would require, but there can be some demand plumbing that's required. For example, if there were to be plugged toilets or something like that, that happens not necessarily as a result of the building system, but as from the use of the system. So we do want to take it into consideration because with more units, there will be more demand calls, but you are correct. There won't necessarily be as many demand calls for newer buildings as for older buildings.
So this is essentially an accounting exercise because the $5,282,000 in 2020 and $6.9 million in 2021 has all been spent.
Correct.
So I guess like if the money was spent, like where did the money come from? Out of which budget bucket did it all of a sudden appear so that it got spent? Because clearly we were, wildly overspent on this line item.
Correct. We were overspent on the amount approved in the contract. We did have the money available in the budget through the operating budget and also through the capital budget. This is where, as part of our reconciliation, it became clear that we didn't have the proper ties between the award approval and the budget that we were getting approved. So we have worked with finance to ensure that the budget is available and will be available going forward. And then the reconciliation will ensure that we are within our budget. And then as noted with the introduction of the Track 2B for homes, there will be a solid tie between what's approved in the vendor awards and what is approved in the budget and what POs are issued for.
So Roseanne, where did that $12.3 million come from that covered those costs?
You're on mute, Roseanne.
You're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry. On a macro level, the overall TCHC expenses are within the approved budget and there are controls in place. So it is
Wait,
within
wait,
the
when you
budget
say
because,
wait, hold on, stop.
Yeah.
You say the approved budget. Does
Yeah.
that mean the global TCHC approved budget?
yeah, so when the business
This is
units,
sorry. What about this line item? This is under maintenance. Some of it's capital,
Correct.
some of it's operating. It's under that budget, right?
Correct.
So how was this backstopped? Pardon the pun.
no, it is within the budget. So even within the line items, so when the business units budget, they take into account the historical spends and they forecast the spend. So it is within each budget line. What we're catching up on now is the paperwork of the contract approvals of the VACs. So those were not taken into account to say, okay, now we need to go back and do all the paperwork. It's more of an administrative now to catch up all the paperwork. The numbers were always there. So if you look at our overall budget, we are within budget when you compare actuals to budget, because those were taken into account when the budgeting process was happening.
The budgets were not tracking to the VAC. So when Alan says that they had annual spends estimated of 1.5 million, that isn't what they were using to budget. They were using prior year's actuals.
And
so
the
no one was looking at the VAC, John.
What's VAC?
Vendor approved.
Vendor approved contract.
Okay.
And that's the disconnect and why there's always these change orders.
Okay.
And hence why, Alan was not looking at other groups, other business units that were spending money.
I mean, you could probably go back 20 years then if you had the man hour. I mean, this is something that's been ongoing for years and years, I guess.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
I think part of it came to light. It just so happened at our November meeting or early December meeting, there was a number of 5-year preventative maintenance contracts that were up for renewal. And so the change orders, there just was a significant number of them. And I think it became apparent that it was an area that needed to be looked at in more detail.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Alan as it relates to the plumbing contract? Alan, can you just speak to how you're going to ensure that all these different groups that you mentioned, that when you're doing the new contract, that you will be coordinating with them?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. So what we will do is when we're looking at putting together new contracts, we will be looking at the holistic spend that we've had previously. And by going into each of the different types of work orders, we understand now who is requesting those work orders so that we can ensure that those groups are consulted with to find out what their forecasts are. And we can obviously use historic. We can layer on top of that inflation. We can layer on top of that if there's any changes to the portfolio. I mean, I know all the contract managed units as an example, that wouldn't play out going forward. But if there was that type of situation, we would layer that into it. And we'll continue to work with finance to ensure that we're capturing all of the costs from all of the different various business units that will be accessing the programs. And then that way, when we go out to RFP, we will have a good solid number that we're using. And then when we come to this particular committee or any committee to get approval, we will have ensured that we have all of the business units accounted for, and that what we're requesting for in terms of approval would be satisfactory to get us through to the end, with what we need for the life of the contract. And then obviously through the continuing reconciliations, if at some point we find out that something is happening and we're seeing a trend higher than what we've had approved, we can be proactive and come in advance to request any necessary approvals to amend the vendor award.
Because I also think it's important when you're assessing a vendor's capacity to do the work, that you have a complete picture of what work is required. And so I do think it, and Roseanne, that information would be easily available to Alan and his team, or is this something that is I wouldn't
say easily available. It will be available.
Okay.
And I think it will be more easily available because of doing the quarterly reconciliations. So we will have that historic information that we've completed the year-end reconciliation, which gives us good insight. And now we'll have the quarterlies, and we can just continue to layer them on top as we move forward and work with Roseanne's team to make sure we've captured everything. Roseanne's correct. It won't be easier, but it's going to be much easier now as a result of having done this reconciliation as a starting point.
Okay. And again, you know, the AG had a number of great recommendations as it related to reviewing work that our contractors do. I know it was related to contract managed buildings, but I think it applies to any contractor that we engage. And I do hope that you'll consider that in making sure that we get value for money, not specifically just to this contract, but in general.
Absolutely.
And can I have a motion to approve change order for the demand plumbing, maintenance services plumbing? John, thank you. Nick, seconder, thank you. All in favor? Your motion's been approved, Alan. And could I ask you to move on to item 9C, which is additional funds for the elevator demand repairs?
Thank you. Item 9C is requesting the approval of a change order in the amount of $627,000 for one of the elevator contracts that was reconciled during the year-end reconciliation process. Providing reliable elevator service for our tenants is a basic building service, just like heat, hot water, and electricity. Facilities management maintains 595 elevators across the portfolio, and over the last 5 years has replaced 205 elevators in 111 buildings. On average, an elevator has a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, just to give you some background on our elevator portfolio for your information. This continued focus on elevator modernizations, as a result of this continued focus on elevator modernization, TCHC's elevator portfolio has an average age of 12 years, and service calls are about 1.04 elevator calls per month, which is consistent with the industry goal of 1 call per month per elevator. This contract is for 35 elevators in 17 buildings. While the overall approved amount of the elevator contract was not exceeded, the amount within the approved original contract only included replacement parts and not the associated maintenance costs. That's one of the lessons learned that we have from this reconciliation process. This change order is to retroactively correct maintenance spends in the amount of $277,000 and for $350,000 to ensure sufficient approval through to the end of this contract. There have been no previous changes to this contract. This contract, as with all others, will be subject to the continued quarterly reconciliations that we've spoken about. We look for your approval on this item.
Are there any questions for Alan as it relates to this, John?
So what's the term of the contract?
This particular contract, I believe, was 7 years, sorry.
And when was it awarded?
Let me just get that.
I'm just trying to figure out what's the time frame for this reconciliation, because I don't see it in the report. Oh,
so the elevator.
It says the contract ends May 31st, 2024. When did it commence?
Let me just get that for you. Actually, this was a 5-year contract, and it started in 2019.
So it started in 2019, and now we're trying to reconcile the fact that we have needed to purchase parts that are not covered by the contract.
Parts and then the associated maintenance that's not covered through the preventive maintenance.
So the associated, but in regard to the parts, is there a breakout? Is there a breakout between the parts and the maintenance?
In terms of the dollar amount,
it's not really that I need that, but I mean, we're now into 2022. The contract started in 2019. Why was it not evident in 2020, or even, shortly after the contract was signed, that we'd sign a contract for which there are services and things that we hadn't accounted for?
Yes, and that's one of the things that the reconciliation highlighted it should have been. It's legacy how the contracts were done. I'm not saying that that's correct. It's how they were done. But absolutely what you've pointed out is absolutely true. And it is one of the gaps that was brought to light through this reconciliation process. And now, absolutely, we have closed that gap and will ensure that we don't have that gap going forward in the
So
future.
in this $627,000, you said there's $350,000 as a contingency to the end of the contract. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's what we are anticipating that we will need in order to ensure we have the proper approval process based on what we've looked at historically. The elevator team reviewed each and every contract individually, to ensure that we would have sufficient funding. And then as part of our quarterly reconciliations going forward, we'll continue to review each of these contracts. And if through the reconciliation we recognize that we may not have sufficient funding, then we will bring forward a change. And then for future contracts, as these ones come up and they go out for a new contract, we'll make sure that we've got sufficient amounts in the contracts, as we've discussed, taking into consideration all factors such as parts, maintenance, that are part of the contract.
Okay, so then the last question is a little bit technical. How do you figure out what kind of parts you're going to need for an elevator that are not common parts?
So the elevator team, they are they're elevator experts. So in our preventive maintenance portions of the contract, there are certain maintenance and inspections that are required on a regular basis. There are some things that are required every year, every 3 years, every 5 years.
Right.
And then within those, they know the common parts that are required in order to complete that. Where we get into parts that aren't common are things that aren't covered as part of our preventive maintenance. So it could be things as a result of vandalism, for example. And that wouldn't be a covered part, for example, because it's not subject to the regular wear and tear that we take into account for the preventive maintenance piece of it. Could be vandalism is probably one of the most common ones, unfortunately, that we do have to look at, but it does.
And Al, thank you for the answer. And the last question is the work that they do, is there a warranty on the work?
Yes, they would, as part of their maintenance and as part of any time we buy parts, there is warranty. I can tell you the elevator team that we have is very, they have an extremely very detailed knowledge of all of our elevators. They work very well in the industry. Our manager of our elevator services team is actually well regarded in the industry as being an expert. And we're very fortunate actually to have the elevator team that we've been able to assemble based on the knowledge that they have, the respect that they have in the industry. And I can tell you from working with the elevator manager, he personally goes through every invoice that we get, and probably more invoices are returned to the elevator companies to say, where he's gone through them line by line to make sure that we are not paying for anything that we shouldn't be paying for.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the answers.
Any other questions for Alan? Could I have a motion to approve change order for demand repairs for the additional funds for the elevator demand repairs? John, seconder Nick, all in favor? Thank you. Motion passed. And Alan, can you take us to 9D, which is the change order for demand repairs, additional funds for the elevator?
Thank you, Chair.
Different contractor.
Yes, this one is for a different, basically the same as the previous item that we just reviewed. is a change order for $411,000 for an elevator contract covering 34 elevators in 15 buildings. The overall approved amount of the contract has not been exceeded. However, like the previous one, only replacement parts were included in the approval and not the associated maintenance costs. This change order is to retroactively correct the maintenance spends in the amount of $181,000 and for $230,000 to ensure sufficient approval through to the end of the contract. There have been no previous changes to this contract. We look to the committee for, as noted, this one will also be, any of our contracts will be part of the quarterly reconciliation process, and your approval is requested.
Are there any questions for Alan? John?
No, I have no further questions on
Oh,
elevator
sorry.
change orders. Okay, I just was moving the recommendation.
Okay, when I ask for questions, you put your hand up. I thought it was a question.
It's okay.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the change order for demand repairs, additional funds for elevator demand repairs? John,
No.
Nick, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passed. We're still on item 9E, Alan. Is the change order for additional funds for tightening lubrication thermography. Electrical
Thank you, Chair
mains and
Emery.
switch gears.
Now we're getting into the really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you. Item
we've been waiting for.
Item 9E is for a change order in the amount of $100,000 for electrical preventive maintenance program run by our facilities management department. During the reconciliation process, it was determined that $52,000 was required for work completed in 2021 and $48,000 is required for 2022 preventive maintenance and demand maintenance services. As noted, ensuring uninterrupted electricity to our buildings is a basic requirement. The completion of this preventive maintenance and demand maintenance services ensures that our building's electrical equipment is maintained in a state of good repair. TCHC has a solid relationship with the Electrical Safety Authority, who have reviewed our programs to ensure that they meet all of their requirements. This contract has had a previous change order in the amount of $387,000 due to additional buildings being added to the portfolio and thus to this program. This contract expires this year and will be retendered, so a new contract will be in place for 2023. So there'll be obviously no further change orders to this contract. Your approval for this change order is requested.
Are there questions for Alan as it relates to this change order?
No.
No. Could I have a motion to approve? Nick? John, seconder? All in favor? Thank you. Motion's been approved. And then I think it's your last item, Alan, is 9F, the change order for additional funds for preventative maintenance services for the chiller systems.
Thank you, Chair Emery. Yes, this is our last item, and 9F is the last change order related to the reconciliation of the preventive maintenance and demand maintenance contracts that we did. It's for chiller preventive maintenance and demand maintenance program to ensure that the chillers we have in select buildings are maintained and serviced properly. While the total approved contract spend was not exceeded, it was determined during the reconciliation that no specific amounts for maintenance in 2016 to 2020 were requested, and therefore requesting a change order in the amount of $200,000 to cover the spends in these previous years. This program also expires this year, and as such, the program will be retendered this year for a new program starting in 2023. So obviously, as with the previous one, there will be no further change orders that will be required. Your approval for this change order is requested.
Questions for Alan? Nick?
Sorry, no questions. I was jumping the gun.
Question. Okay, could I have a motion to approve? Nick? John, seconder, all in favor. Thank you. And thank you, Alan. And we appreciate you implementing those process changes so that I'm sure we'll have change orders in the future, but for different reasons and on a more proactive basis.
And thank you, Chair Emery, to you and the committee for allowing us to walk through these items with you and for your approvals. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will move to the last item on our agenda, which is item number 10, which is the Internal Audit Department's annual report for 2021. And I will turn this over to Karim. I can see him. I think maybe you're on mute. Oh, could somebody send him a text, because we are actually we're early. So he may not actually be at his computer. Can I say that again? We're early to this item.
Be early.
Can I ask that go in the minutes? This was a hefty agenda, and there certainly was a lot of reading to do. So the fact that we've been able to get through it is great. I can see Karim now. So Karim, we're at item number 10, which is your Internal Audit Department annual report. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, Karim, we've got you now.
Yeah. Okay. Morning, everyone. Again, Internal Audit Report 2021. Sonia, if you can please share it with everyone.
Am I the only one that's not seeing this?
I see it.
Sonia, can you try and reload it?
Okay. If
Take it
everybody
down
else
and
can
put it
see it,
back
I'm
up.
fine.
Better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Again, I would like to start with page 306, which is providing the governance structure of the Internal Audit Department. Page 306, please. So as BIFAC is aware, we have got functional reporting to BIFAC and administrative reporting to the CFO, Roseanne. I've got two teams within the Internal Audit Department. RGI team does the RGI reviews and related analysis projects, and the corporate audit team executes the annual audit plan as approved by BIFAC every year. This year's plan was approved on January 27th. Next page, please. So I will, quickly review the highlights for 2021. As we know, COVID challenges continued in 2021 as well. We worked remotely throughout the year, and there were some challenges in obtaining the audit information and documentation. But with the help of the auditees and collaboration, we managed to substantially complete our audit plan for 2021. We presented 5 reports to BIFAC in all. And provided 62 recommendations. And aside from those 5 audit reports, we also presented 4 quarterly reports to BIFAC, providing updates on the status of the annual audit plan for the year. In addition to that, we also provided 2 half-yearly reports to BIFAC, which was status of the open audit recommendations from previous audit reports. On the RGI side, the RGI team reviewed a total of 222 audit files from our projects. And on top of that, we also did 4 data analysis projects as well, which provided 14 recommendations to the management. Next page, please. This provides, on the corporate side, this provides the reports which were presented to BIFAC in 2021 and provides the status and the number of recommendations made. Along with that, it also mentions that we provided quarterly reports, as I mentioned just now, and also the annual audit plan and the rolling plan for 3 years were also presented to BIFAC, which BIFAC approved. Next page, please. This provides the RGI related projects that we completed. The breakdown is there. We reviewed a total of 222 files. And the data analysis projects at the bottom of the page, 14 recommendations were made out of 4 data analysis projects. Next page, please. Outlook for 2022. As before, we will continue to execute the annual audit plan, which was approved by BIFAC, like I mentioned, January 27 this year. Along with the audits that we will execute, we will also do our continuous controls monitoring project, the CCM project. On the planning side, we will at the end of the year again revisit the annual audit plan, present a new audit plan for BIFAC's approval for 2023. In addition to the rolling plan will be updated and will be presented again to BIFAC for approval. On the other than the corporate audits projects that are in the audit plan, we will also be providing support to the city's internal audit department. They will indicated that they will be doing one audit in which they will require our support. They call it financial statements review. We will be providing that support as well. In addition to that, our RGI team will continue to provide RGI reviews to different projects. And we will also be, depending on the availability of time and resources, we will also be providing analysis projects in collaboration with management. And if there is a direction from BIFAC for any additional assignments, we will be happy to do that. And we will include that as part of our annual audit plan for 2023. Next page, please. This provides, the Appendix 1 provides details of all the internal audit projects completed during 2021. So all these reports have already been presented to BIFAC. Of course, discussions have happened. And the objectives and conclusions are just mentioned here for reference. Next page, please. So this continues the summary of the projects completed along with the conclusions reached for all the audit projects. In the bottom of the page, rolling plan, of course, was presented, quarterly reports presented, all of that has been detailed here. And next page, please. Top of the page, item 9, the follow-up audit recommendation status also is provided to BIFAC twice a year. This is the status as of 31st December. We did discuss this today. The recommendations, the status as of 31st December is 24 were fully implemented and 60 were in process and 10 are yet to start. And then it provides a brief summary afterwards of the management requests and the analysis projects that we carried out. And at the end, I'd like to thank BIFAC, of course, for the continued support and to management for their support and the collaboration and the support for all the auditees during the year. And thank you to my team as well, that they have done a very good job. They've done hard work throughout the year for us to be able to complete the BIFAC approved annual audit plan. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for John?
Kareem, I noticed there's a vacancy on your team. How long has that position been vacant and when do you expect to fill it?
So there have been a couple of vacancies over the last some months. Currently, the posting is out. We are in the process, and most likely we will be interviewing one candidate next week. And other than that, the posting is out. We are waiting for more candidates. We will shortlist, do the phone screening, and then if as a result of phone screening, we shortlist for interviews. Those interviews will be carried out within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
So how long has the position been vacant?
So the one position has been vacant. Somebody left last month, and there has been other 2 positions which have been vacant since last year.
Oh,
we hired somebody, and she was supposed to join in July. 2 days before joining, she said she cannot join. So that went, the efforts did not materialize. And after that, We have somebody who joined in November, and that person has now resigned. So that person is not going to be with us from next week. So
they joined in November and they're gone by April.
Yes, they will be gone next week. So the posting is out. I'm waiting for suitable candidates.
Okay. And in regard to it's good to see that of the 94 recommendations that were made, 24 have been implemented, 60 are in progress, 10 not started. When you make those recommendations, do you give them a guideline as to when it should be implemented? You say, this should be completed in the next 6 months, or is that part of your job, or is it not part of your job?
No. So basically, it is a management decision. When we discuss, when we finalize the audit reports, we discuss our observation and corresponding recommendations with the auditee, and eventually it is discussed at the divisional leadership level, at VP level, and after that, we finalize the report. We provide the report to them. They then provide us the management action plan. So it is up to the management. That is not internal audit's role. It is a management's role to let us know how they are going to implement and with what timeline. And based on that, then we do the follow-up to make sure that the action which was agreed has been taken.
And then do they ever push back and say, we don't agree, we don't really need to do that?
Well, sometimes this happens. So we talk to them and we make sure that at the end of the day, we are on the same page.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Adele. Thank you, Kareem.
Jag, do you want to speak to management's approach to implementing or considering these recommendations and the timelines?
Thank you for the opportunity. As far as the timelines, we, as Kareem has indicated, that is the process. I do think that we are looking to try and shorten the timelines as we go forward. As far as the process for if there was a disagreement in any way, I think it's more around clarification rather than a full-blown disagreement. And generally, I think that would be the case.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Kareem as it relates to his annual?
Just only a minor comment in that the last report we saw showed how many of the recommendations were taken up by management and sort of where they were. And I'm not sure if it's appropriate to include something like that in the annual report from audit, but I quite like it from a, linking the recommendations to something being implemented. So, that's to me a big part of the value add. So I'm not sure, from a, go forward perspective, that makes sense to include in the annual report, annual review, that X% or X number of recommendations were endorsed by management and put into implementation.
Well, actually, 100% of the recommendations that have been made over the last few years have been agreed by management.
Yeah, no, I know, and I appreciate that. I just mean more from the review report perspective. Should that be included as part of the audit team's review report?
So I'm sorry, I'm not sure. You are saying we should be or we should not be including it?
We should be included. Was that in the report? I didn't see that specifically, but I might have missed it.
So the top of page 9, which is page number 313 of the package, it is summarized. Is that what you are referring to? Item number 9, top of page 313?
Yep, that's right. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
It was page 309 or something of your readings, Nick. So
I liked it when they did it with the color chart and all the colors. All the pretty colors really helped.
I can put some colors in there next time. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Spring is here. We need colors.
Yes, we're visual. Very visual on this committee. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments?
Just say good luck with the hiring of the additional staff.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, and please thank your team, Kareem, for all of their efforts. And it is a valuable contribution to the organization. So we really do appreciate it. So please pass that on to your team members.
I will do that. And thanks for all your support and support from the management as well.
Great. So could I ask if there are is there any other business?
I think we just need a motion We just need a motion to receive.
Oh, a
Karim.
motion to receive. I'm sorry. Could I have a motion to receive Karim's report, annual 2021 report?
So moved.
John, Nick, seconder, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. Sorry, Dara. Could I ask if there's any other business to come before the public session of BIFAC? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? John,
Yep.
Nick, seconder, all in favor? And thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.